"A duchess may wear a gown," Sir Percival said. "She should not pretend to understand how one is made." Laughter travelled through the royal wardrobe hall. Aurelia Vane was removed from the inspection table and placed behind the seamstress's barrier while Duke Benedict stepped into his new ceremonial coat. Under the gas lamps, Aurelia saw green powder rising from its embroidered collar. "Take it off," she warned. Percival smiled. "The coat has passed every official test." Benedict lifted his arm to begin the ceremony. His face tightened. Red burns spread beneath the gold collar, and his legs nearly gave way. Aurelia crossed the hall, cut the coat from his body and exposed the poisoned lining before the entire court. Then guards opened her workbox. Inside lay a packet of the same toxic dye. Percival pointed towards her. "The Duchess has poisoned him." An hour earlier, the royal wardrobe hall had looked like a shrine to perfection. Rows of ceremonial coats stood beneath crystal chandeliers. Gold braid, silver buttons, and colored silks gleamed beneath hundreds of gas lamps. Ambassadors, courtiers, and military officers gathered to inspect the uniforms, prepared for the following morning's royal procession. At the center of the hall stood Aurelia Vane, Duchess of Marlow, wearing a gown of brilliant turquoise silk. The color was impossible to ignore. That was precisely why Duchess Octavia Ashcombe disliked it. "A shade suitable for a theatre curtain," she remarked. Aurelia looked at Octavia's pale grey gown. "And yours would be excellent for concealing dust." Several noblewomen hid their smiles. Octavia did not. At 63, she was one of the most influential women at court, and the mother of Benedict Ashcombe, Duke of Kingswell. She believed rank should appear restrained, controlled, and untouched by labor. Aurelia represented everything she disapproved of. Her family's textile estates employed female dyers, cutters, and loom operators. Aurelia knew the price of thread, the temperature of dye vats, and the difference between silk weakened by acid and silk softened by steam. She also insisted upon visiting the workshops herself. Society had responded by calling her the Seamstress Duchess. The title was intended as an insult. Aurelia had never treated it as one. Sir Percival Dawn approached the inspection table carrying the official register. His position as chairman of the Royal Guild of Tailors and Dyers gave him control over nearly every important clothing contract in the kingdom. He stopped beside Aurelia's name. The entry read, "Her Grace, the Duchess of Marlow, Lady Patron of decorative color." Aurelia took the pen from his hand. "That is not my position." Percival raised one eyebrow. "It is the most appropriate description. I direct production at Marlow. I supervise dye testing and textile inspection. You employ people who perform those duties. So do you." His smile became colder. "The distinction is that I possess recognized qualifications." "Your qualifications did not prevent 3 shipments of unstable violet dye from entering military stores last winter." The room quietened. Percival closed the register. "Those reports were never confirmed. They were confirmed by the burns on 14 workers. Women faint in dye houses for many reasons, usually because men like you describe poison as delicate health." Benedict entered before Percival could reply. He wore a black court coat and the blue sash of the royal household. At 41, he had built a reputation for discipline and administrative precision. As supervisor of royal ceremony, every uniform, procession, and public arrangement ultimately passed through his office. His gaze moved from Percival to Aurelia. "Is there a difficulty?" "My title has been added," Aurelia said. "My profession has been removed." Percival gave a quiet sigh. "Her Grace objects to the ceremonial wording. I object to being invited as an inspector and recorded as decoration." Benedict glanced towards the ambassadors entering the hall. "The register can be corrected after the presentation." "It is being used now. We have 400 guests waiting, and that makes accuracy less important. It makes timing important." Octavia joined them. "Benedict, The Duchess is dressed more suitably for the workers' gallery. Let her inspect from there if she insists upon discussing thread. Aurelia looked at Benedict. He heard the contempt. She waited to see whether he would challenge it. Instead, he said, "Let us avoid turning a seating matter into a public dispute." Aurelia's expression did not change. Matters become small when only another person is required to endure them. She crossed to the seamstress's barrier herself. Lydia Hart, the chief cutter, stood behind it with nearly 30 women from the royal workshop. Most wore plain grey dresses and kept their hands folded to hide burns along their fingers. Aurelia noticed immediately. "What happened to your skin?" she asked. Lydia lowered her voice. "The new green lining." "Which lining?" "The ceremonial coats." Percival's assistant called for silence before Lydia could answer. The presentation began. Benedict's coat was carried into the center of the hall upon a velvet-covered stand. It was dark blue, embroidered with gold oak leaves, and lined with a rich green silk intended to represent national prosperity. The audience applauded. Aurelia did not. She studied the collar. The green was too bright beneath the gaslight. Fine powder clung to the edge of the embroidery. Where the cloth had touched the tailor's damp fingers, the thread had darkened. "Who tested the lining?" she asked Lydia. "The Guild Laboratory." "Did they test this coat?" Lydia shook her head. "They tested a sample roll. The cloth was changed afterwards." "Who ordered the change?" Before Lydia could answer, Percival summoned Benedict forwards. The ceremonial coat of Kingswell, prepared for tomorrow's procession. Benedict removed his black coat and allowed 2 attendants to dress him in the new garment. Aurelia stepped beyond the barrier. "Wait." Percival blocked her path. "The official inspection is complete." "No." The outer cloth was inspected. The lining was not. He raised his voice. "A duchess may wear a gown. She should not pretend to understand how one is made." Laughter traveled through the hall. Aurelia ignored it. Under the heat of the lamps, a faint green dust rose from Benedict's collar. "Take it off," she warned. Percival smiled. "The coat has passed every official test." Benedict lifted one arm as the master of ceremonies announced the beginning of the presentation. His expression changed. At first, only slightly. Then his hand moved towards his throat. The skin above the collar had turned red. "Benedict," Octavia said. He attempted to answer, but drew a sharp, uneven breath. Aurelia pushed past Percival. "Remove the coat." Benedict remained upright through discipline alone. "It may be the heat. The heat is releasing the dye." His knees weakened. Aurelia caught his arm before he struck the floor. Several courtiers shouted for a physician. Percival reached for the buttons. "Do not pull it over his head," Aurelia said. "You will spread the powder across his face." She took a pair of shears from her workbox. A guard seized her wrist. "She has a blade. She is cutting cloth, not the Duke." Benedict's breathing became worse. He looked directly at the guard. "Release her." Aurelia cut through the front seam, then the sleeves. The coat fell open. Beneath it, angry burns spread across Benedict's shoulders and chest wherever the green lining had touched perspiration. The hall fell silent. Aurelia lifted the cloth with the tip of the shears. "This lining contains a metallic dye. Heat and moisture have activated it." Dr. Edwin Shaw hurried forwards. "The Duke requires treatment. Clean water first. No ointment until the residue is removed. I am the guild physician." "And your guild approved the coat." His face hardened. Benedict looked towards Aurelia. "Do as she says." Servants brought basins. The physician began washing the affected skin whilst Aurelia examined the cut lining. A small silver leaf symbol had been stamped near the lower seam. Lydia saw it and went pale. The same mark appeared on the fabric that had burned the workers. Percival noticed her reaction. Then he looked towards Aurelia's open workbox. "Search it." Aurelia turned. "On what grounds?" "You approached the coat with tools and immediately identified the substance. Because I know what poisoned cloth looks like. 2 guards emptied the contents onto the inspection table. Thread cards, testing papers, scissors, a magnifying lens. Then a sealed packet of green powder fell onto the velvet. Beside it lay an invoice bearing the name of Marlowe Textile Works. Octavia gasped. Percival lifted the packet carefully. The same compound. Aurelia examined the paper. She had never seen it before. The invoice is false. How convenient. The Marlowe Works have not used that chemical for 2 years. And yet it was found among your tools. Percival addressed the room. The Duchess lost the royal contract. She then entered the hall carrying poison and publicly attacked the coat she wished to replace. Aurelia looked towards Benedict. He was seated now, his shirt open at the collar while the physician treated his burns. Pain had left his face pale, but his attention remained sharp. "You know this was planted," she said. "I know the evidence requires examination." "By Percival's guild?" "No. Then do not allow him to control it." The doors opened. A messenger entered carrying reports from the Eastern barracks. Benedict read the first page. His expression darkened. "What is it?" Aurelia asked. "Several guards were issued new ceremonial uniforms this morning, and 4 developed burns after wearing them during rehearsal." Lydia stepped through the barrier. "There are 600 more uniforms in the lower warehouse." Percival turned on her. "You were not asked to speak." Aurelia faced him. "That is why this continued." Benedict looked towards the messenger. "When are the remaining uniforms to be distributed?" "At midnight, Your Grace. The full guard dresses before dawn." Aurelia examined the silver leaf mark inside the poisoned coat. "If the same lining was used, hundreds of men will be wearing it beneath direct sun for 3 hours. Dr. Shaw frowned. "You cannot know that without inspecting the stock." "Then open the warehouse," Percival answered before Benedict could. "The warehouse is sealed under guild authority. Breaking it would compromise royal property." Aurelia stared at him. "Royal property is already burning human skin." Benedict rose despite the physician's protest. "The warehouse will be opened." Percival's composure slipped. "Your Grace, the procession cannot be disrupted by an unverified accusation." Benedict looked at the burns across his own chest. "It is no longer unverified." He ordered 2 guards to escort Aurelia to the lower stores. Percival raised the packet found in her box, and the evidence against her. Benedict hesitated. "Only a moment, but it was enough. Until this is resolved, the Duchess will remain under supervision." Aurelia met his gaze. "You wore their poison because the certificate looked respectable. Now you imprison me because the accusation does." "I am protecting the investigation." "No. You are protecting the ceremony from the inconvenience of deciding who to believe." She walked towards the lower corridor without waiting to be led. Lydia followed until Percival caught her arm. "You remain here." Aurelia turned. "Let her go. She is a guild employee. She is a witness." Percival lowered his voice. "She is a seamstress." Lydia pulled free. "And I cut every poisoned lining in that warehouse." The guards looked towards Benedict. He nodded. "Let her pass." The lower warehouse door was locked with 2 guild seals. Benedict broke them himself. Inside, hundreds of blue uniforms hung in ordered rows. Aurelia entered between them. The air carried the bitter scent of heated metal. She opened the nearest coat. Silver leaf. The next, silver leaf. Every lining bore the same mark. Lydia reached into the seam of one jacket and removed a folded strip of paper. It contained a list of names. Not soldiers, women. Dozens of workshop employees, each followed by a date and a medical note. Rash, fainting, dismissed. Chest pain, unfit for work. Burns to both hands, disobedient. Benedict read the list in silence. "They knew," Aurelia said. A heavy door slammed behind them. The warehouse locks turned from the outside. Gas hissed through the ceiling pipes. Lydia looked up. The heating vents. Aurelia saw green dust beginning to rise from 600 poisoned uniforms. Someone had sealed them inside the warehouse and opened the hot air system. Benedict pulled at the door. It did not move. Beyond it, Percival's voice carried through the iron panel. By morning, the court will learn that the seamstress Duchess entered the warehouse with poison and killed the Duke who discovered her. The gas lamps flared. Green powder filled the air. Aurelia tore a strip from her turquoise skirt and covered her mouth. "Do not breathe deeply," she ordered. Benedict turned towards her. "How do we get out?" Aurelia looked across the poisoned uniforms, the locked door, and the heating pipes above them. "For once, Your Grace, you will stop protecting the ceremony." She picked up a cutting blade and helped me destroy every coat in this room. Aurelia cut through the first ceremonial coat. Benedict stared as the embroidered fabric fell to the floor. That garment cost more than a laborer earns in 3 years. "Then Sir Percival has found an expensive method of murder." She sliced open a second coat and pulled out the poisoned lining. "Help Lydia remove the outer cloth. We need the clean wool." "What for?" "To cover our faces properly before the powder reaches our lungs." Benedict took the nearest pair of shears. The Duke of Kingswell had spent months approving the uniforms from written reports. Now he stood inside the locked warehouse, cutting apart the very symbols of royal ceremony he had been determined to protect. Lydia worked through another row. "The heating system draws air from the western furnace," she said. "If we close the intake, the powder may settle." "The control wheel is outside," Benedict replied. "Not the emergency release," Aurelia said. She pointed towards a narrow iron grill near the ceiling. Textile warehouses required an upper vent in case dye vapors accumulated. Percival had opened the heating pipes, but appeared to have forgotten the older ventilation system. The release chain hung 20 feet above them. Benedict dragged a loading ladder beneath it. "I will climb. The frame is unstable," Aurelia warned. "You require height. For once, my title may provide something useful. Your height, perhaps." The title remains ornamental, despite the burning in his skin. He climbed. Green dust thickened beneath the ceiling. Benedict covered his mouth with a strip of clean wool, while Aurelia steadied the ladder. The emergency chain had been tied back with wire. "He prepared this as well," Benedict said. "Can you cut it?" "Not from this angle." Aurelia examined the rows of hanging uniforms. "Lydia, release the upper rail." The seamstress understood immediately. Together, they pulled the locking pins from a wheeled clothing frame and pushed it beneath the ladder. "What are you doing?" Benedict asked. "Improving your position." Aurelia climbed onto the frame, then onto the ladder beside him. She used her smaller shears to reach the wire. The first cut failed. Heat burned through her gloves. Below them, Lydia began coughing. Aurelia cut again. The wire snapped. Benedict pulled the chain. The ceiling vents opened. Cold air rushed through the warehouse. Green powder lifted in a violent cloud before escaping through the roof. At the same moment, Lydia found a service hatch hidden behind stacked packing cases. "It leads to the pressing room." The hatch had been nailed shut. Benedict climbed down and drove one shoulder against it. The wood held. Aurelia handed him a heavy tailor's iron. "Try the hinges, not the dignity." He struck the upper hinge. Lydia attacked the lower one with a cutting knife. The panel broke outwards. They crawled into the empty pressing room just as guards began opening the warehouse from the corridor. Not Benedict's guards. Percival's men. Aurelia extinguished the nearest lamp. Through the narrow doorway, they watched 2 officials enter wearing protective masks. One carried a bucket of oil. "They intend to burn the warehouse," Lydia whispered. "And blame the poison for the fire," Aurelia said. Benedict stepped forwards. She caught his sleeve. "Not yet. That evidence will be destroyed. Then we preserve the men attempting to destroy it." She indicated a speaking tube running from the pressing room to the upper workshop. Lydia lifted the brass receiver. "Can anyone hear us?" A woman's voice answered faintly. Aurelia spoke into the tube. "This is the Duchess of Marlowe. Lock the western doors. Bring every worker to the lower corridor. Do not confront the men until the Duke gives the order." The voice hesitated, then replied, "Yes, Your Grace." Aurelia looked at Benedict. "Now you may use your title." He opened the pressing room door. "By order of the Duke of Kingswell, put down the oil." The two officials froze. Behind them, workshop doors opened. Dozens of seamstresses entered the corridor carrying shears, pressing irons and rolls of heavy cloth. The officials attempted to retreat. The women blocked every exit. Lydia stepped into the warehouse. "These are the men who changed the lining after inspection." One official dropped the bucket. The other reached for his coat. A guard's pistol appeared in his hand. Benedict moved towards Aurelia. She stepped aside before he could shield her. Then she threw a roll of wool at the man's arm. The shot struck the ceiling. The seamstresses dragged him to the floor beneath yards of fabric. Percival's carefully controlled workforce had stopped obeying. By midnight, the Royal Wardrobe Hall was under guard. The poisoned uniforms remained sealed inside the warehouse. The two captured officials confessed that Percival had ordered them to burn the stock and leave Aurelia's workbox beside the furnace. Yet Percival himself had vanished. Benedict wanted to cancel the procession immediately. A court secretary opposed him. "Foreign ambassadors have already arrived. A public cancellation will suggest an attack upon the crown." Aurelia placed the poisoned lining on the council table. "There has been an attack upon the crown." "An internal matter," the secretary replied. "It should be handled discreetly." Lydia's expression hardened. Discreetly is how women disappeared from the workshop after becoming ill. The secretary did not acknowledge her. Benedict did. "How many?" Lydia placed the list from the warehouse before him. 74 names in 18 months. Some were dismissed. Some cannot work. 2 died. Dr. Edwin Shaw stood near the door. Benedict faced him. "You signed their medical reports. They suffered from exhaustion and weak constitutions." Aurelia laid his original notes beside the official reports. Samuel Price, the warehouse manager, had recovered them from a locked cabinet. The private records described chemical burns, lung injury, and metal poisoning. The reports sent to Benedict's office described fainting, poor diet, and female sensitivity. Aurelia looked at the physician. "You did not misdiagnose them. You translated poison into prejudice because you knew no gentleman would question it." Shaw looked towards Percival's empty chair. "He controlled my appointment." "And the women controlled nothing," Lydia said. The physician lowered his eyes. Benedict turned to the secretary. "The procession is cancelled." Before the order could leave the room, bells sounded from the eastern courtyard. A messenger rushed inside. "The guard has already assembled in the royal square." Benedict frowned. They were not due to dress until 4. Sir Percival advanced the schedule. He presented an order bearing your seal. Aurelia examined the document. The seal was genuine. The signature was copied. 600 guards were already wearing poisoned uniforms. Percival had moved the ceremony forwards before they could stop him. Dawn had barely touched the city when Aurelia reached the royal square. Rows of guards stood beneath banners and gas torches. The early hour had not prevented crowds from gathering. Courtiers, journalists, and foreign guests filled the surrounding balconies. Percival stood upon the ceremonial platform. He wore the gold chain of the Royal Guild and held a proclamation accusing Aurelia of poisoning the Duke, sabotaging royal uniforms, and provoking a workers' rebellion. Her turquoise gown, torn at the hem and stained with dye, made her visible from the farthest side of the square. Percival pointed towards her. "Arrest the Duchess." Royal guards moved. Benedict stepped beside Aurelia. "Stand down." Percival raised the forged order. "The Duke is under the influence of the woman who attempted to kill him." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Aurelia looked at the first line of soldiers. Sweat already darkened their collars. One young guard rubbed at his neck. "Remove your coats," she called. Percival laughed. "The seamstress Duchess wishes to undress the royal guard before foreign ambassadors." Aurelia held up the poisoned lining. "The silver leaf mark inside your collars identifies the contaminated cloth." The soldiers remained still. They had been trained to obey rank, not a woman behind a worker's barrier. Then the young guard staggered. Red burns spread above his collar. Aurelia crossed the square and cut the fastening from his coat. Green powder rose beneath it. The men nearest him recoiled. "Check your own linings," she ordered. One guard opened his collar. Silver leaf? Another did the same. Then another. Across the formation, hundreds of soldiers began removing their ceremonial coats. Percival shouted for them to remain in position. No one obeyed. From the western street came the sound of metal striking stone. Lydia led the royal workshop employees into the square. Each woman carried a pair of shears in one hand and a piece of poisoned green fabric in the other. They did not kneel. They placed their shears upon the paving stones, one after another. Hundreds of blades struck the ground. The sound travelled through the square like a declaration. Octavia stood among the noble spectators. "You have brought servants into a royal ceremony," she said. Aurelia faced her. The royal ceremony was built upon their injured hands. Octavia looked at the sick guards and said nothing more. Samuel Price arrived with the original warehouse books. Miriam from the dye laboratory brought chemical purchase records. Lydia identified the men who had changed the linings after inspection. Dr. Shaw was forced to read both versions of his medical reports aloud. Aurelia displayed the invoice planted in her workbox. "The code printed here was retired 2 years ago. The signature copies my name but reverses the technical symbol used for treated silk." She held the false packet beside a genuine Marlowe dye bag. "The materials, packaging, and chemical composition do not match my workshop." Samuel opened the delivery ledger. Every poisoned shipment had been purchased through Dawn Industrial Supplies, a company controlled by Percival's brother. Percival backed away from the platform. "This is a conspiracy organized by discontented women." Lydia stepped forwards. "No, it is a record kept by women you believed too insignificant to remember." Police officers approached. Percival attempted to escape through the ceremonial carriage entrance, but the guards he had poisoned closed the gate. He was arrested in the center of the square. Benedict addressed the soldiers and workers after Percival had been removed. He did not praise Aurelia as though granting her competence. He spoke only of his own failures. "I accepted certificates without examining who produced them. I signed contracts without inspecting the conditions beneath them. I remained silent when the Duchess of Marlowe was mocked because I valued the appearance of order above the truth." He looked towards the women from the workshop. "We praised the beauty of these garments because we never asked what they did to the hands that made them." Then he stepped down. The square belonged to Aurelia. She demanded that every poisoned uniform be destroyed under public supervision. The Royal Guild lost its exclusive contracts. Production was transferred to a cooperative owned by cutters, dyers, seamstresses, and warehouse workers. Every finished garment would carry the names of those responsible for its design, construction, and inspection. No physician employed by a manufacturer could certify that manufacturer's safety. No worker could be dismissed for reporting illness. 6 months later, Benedict visited Marlowe wearing a plain, undyed coat. He handed it to Aurelia. Inside the lining were the signatures of every person who had made it. "Is it safe?" he asked. She inspected the seams. "The coat is. And the man wearing it? That requires a longer examination. May I begin with dinner?" Aurelia turned towards Lydia. "Did you approve the stitching?" Lydia examined the sleeve and nodded. Only then did Aurelia offer Benedict her hand. The seamstress Duchess left the workshop in brilliant blue silk. This time, no one laughed at the color. Behind her, hundreds of workers saw their names stitched into the garments they had created, and the Duke walked beside the woman whose expertise had never required his permission to become real.